He may send you messages every single day, reply within minutes, and keep the conversation going for hours, yet still not feel a deep emotional connection. But the instant he sees you face to face, everything becomes much harder to hide. In that very first moment, before he speaks or has time to control his expression, his genuine reaction often reveals far more than any text message ever could. Welcome back to a place where we explore the hidden psychology behind attraction, relationships, and the small behaviors that quietly reveal what people truly feel. Today, we're looking at something many people completely overlook. A man's real emotions are rarely found in the words he types. They often appear in the first few seconds of seeing you in person. Many people spend hours reading messages over and over, wondering what every sentence means. They count replies, notice response times, and convince themselves that constant texting must be proof of deeper feelings. But the truth is much simpler. Sending messages is easy. It requires very little emotional investment. Someone can text several people every day, keep conversations active, and still never develop a meaningful emotional connection. Consistent texting can simply become part of a routine, a habit, or a way of staying entertained. It does not automatically reveal genuine interest. If you've been searching for answers inside your phone, you may have been looking in the wrong place all along. Stay with me, because what happens next is often the most honest moment you'll ever witness. Real emotions usually appear before someone has time to think about how they want to behave. They are found in that first second when his eyes meet yours, before he chooses his words, before he adjusts his body language, and before he decides how he wants to come across. There is one brief moment where his natural reaction speaks for him. That tiny greeting often says more than 100 carefully written messages ever could. In that instant, there is no carefully planned response or perfect edited sentence. There is only instinct. That is why those first few seconds are so valuable. Once you learn to notice them, you stop relying on guesses, endless conversations with friends, or replaying old messages in your mind. The answer has often been right in front of you every time you've met in person. You simply didn't know where to look. Think honestly for a moment. How much time have you spent going back and forth, feeling certain one day and completely confused the next? That cycle is emotionally exhausting, and in many cases it continues only because attention is focused on the wrong signals. What comes next may surprise you, because the first sign is so quick that many people never notice it at all. If you're ready to stop guessing and start understanding what genuine interest really looks like, make sure you stay until the end. If you enjoy exploring relationship psychology and hidden attraction signals, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future insights. Every lesson is designed to help you understand people with greater clarity instead of relying on assumptions. The first sign happens almost instantly. It is so subtle that most people miss it completely. When a man feels genuinely excited to see you, his attention naturally shifts the moment you appear. Whatever had his focus only seconds earlier suddenly becomes less important. He does not consciously decide to do this. It simply happens. The conversation he was having, the task he was finishing, or whatever occupied his mind briefly fades into the background because his attention moves toward you almost automatically. That shift often happens before he even realizes it himself. Don't skip this part, because this tiny detail can reveal more than hours of texting ever will. Now compare that to someone who feels only casual interest. When a person is emotionally uninvested, they usually finish what they are already doing before giving you their attention. There is nothing wrong with that, but it often reflects a different emotional priority. Someone who is deeply interested tends to react differently. Their focus changes almost immediately because seeing you naturally captures their attention. It is not about being dramatic or ignoring everyone else in the room. It is about the small instinctive pause that happens before they even think about it. These are the moments that are difficult to fake because they happen faster than conscious decisions. Learning to recognize these quiet reactions gives you a much clearer understanding of someone's feelings than trying to decode endless text messages. Real attraction often reveals itself through spontaneous behavior rather than carefully chosen words. And once you begin noticing these natural responses, you will find yourself relying much less on guesses and much more on what people genuinely show you in real life. They finish what they are saying, they send the text, then they look up. That is how people usually behave when someone can wait a few more seconds. But when a man is genuinely excited to see you, that pattern often changes without him even noticing. You don't simply become part of the moment, you quietly become the center of it. His attention shifts almost immediately, not because he has decided it should, but because his mind reacts before he has time to think. That response usually appears before he even says his first word. Picture this for a moment. He is sitting with friends, completely involved in a conversation. Then you walk into the room. As soon as he notices you, he pauses in the middle of what he is saying. He does not finish his sentence or wait for the perfect moment. His focus naturally moves toward you as though everything else briefly fades into the background. Sometimes the people around him notice the change because the conversation suddenly stops. That is not simply good manners or casual friendliness. It is often an instinctive reaction that happens before he has time to manage it. Something inside him immediately decides that your arrival deserves his attention. The next time you see him in a place where he is already busy, quietly observe what happens. Does he naturally stop what he is doing? Does his attention move toward you without hesitation? Those few seconds often reveal much more than any message he could ever send. Stay with me because the next sign is incredibly simple, yet it quietly reveals what may already be happening inside his mind. Another small detail that many people overlook is the way he says hello. If he greets you by using your name right away instead of simply saying hi or hey, it can be surprisingly meaningful. Imagine hearing, "Good morning, Emma," or "Hey, Emma," instead of a general greeting. Most people do not naturally greet everyone this way. Using someone's name immediately often happens because that person was already on their mind before the interaction even began. Your name comes out naturally because it is already sitting at the front of his thoughts. It is rarely something that requires planning. That is why hearing your name can feel more personal and more direct. It creates the feeling that the greeting belongs specifically to you instead of being something he says to everyone. That reaction is not just your imagination. Your mind is picking up on a subtle sign that his attention may already have been focused on you before the conversation even started. What comes next may surprise you because the third sign happens without words at all and is even harder to hide. The next clue appears through body language, and it is one of the most natural reactions a person can have. When a man feels strongly drawn to someone, his body often turns toward them almost automatically. It is not only his face that moves, his shoulders shift, his chest naturally points toward you, even his feet may gradually angle in your direction. Most people never notice these details because they happen so quickly and without conscious thought. Our bodies naturally move toward the people or things that capture our interest. When someone is only making polite conversation, they may smile, nod, or briefly make eye contact while keeping the rest of their body exactly where it was. The interaction happens, but very little else changes. Genuine interest often looks different. His entire posture quietly adjusts as though he wants to become fully present in the conversation. That movement is usually instinctive rather than planned. It happens because his attention has already shifted before he even realizes it himself. Don't skip this part because once you begin watching body language instead of listening only to words, many confusing situations suddenly become much easier to understand. The important lesson is this: words can be carefully chosen, but natural reactions are much harder to control. Someone can think about every message before pressing send, but those first few seconds in person usually happen too quickly for careful planning. That is why real-life interactions often reveal far more than long conversations through a phone. The next time you meet him, pay attention to the little things. Notice whether he stops what he is doing, whether he naturally says your name, and whether his body quietly turns toward you without hesitation. None of these signs alone can tell you exactly how someone feels, but together they create a much clearer picture than text messages ever could. When you begin focusing on genuine behavior instead of trying to decode every sentence he types, you'll spend less time guessing and more time understanding what his actions naturally communicate. The reason these small movements matter is simple. Your body reacts before your mind has time to organize the perfect response. It does not carefully plan every detail. It simply responds to what feels important in the moment. That is why body language often reveals emotions that words never do. Imagine this scene. A woman is standing quietly in a hallway when the man she has been thinking about turns the corner. He notices her from several steps away. Before they are even close enough to speak, something changes. His posture naturally shifts in her direction. His shoulders straighten. If he had been standing casually a moment earlier, he now appears more alert without even realizing it. By the time he reaches her and says hello, his entire body is facing her. His feet point toward her, his shoulders are open, and his attention seems completely focused on the interaction. He never consciously decided to stand that way. He was not thinking about posture or body language. His reaction simply happened on its own. That is exactly why it matters. While he may not notice these changes himself, they are often easy to see from the outside. His body quietly reveals feelings long before his words ever have the chance. Stay with me, because the next sign is even more subtle and many people sense it before they can explain it. Another powerful clue is something you often feel rather than clearly identify. When a man has genuine interest, the emotional energy around him shifts the moment he greets you. It is rarely dramatic or exaggerated. Instead, it appears through small changes that create a different atmosphere. His voice sounds a little warmer, his expression softens. There is a natural brightness in his face that was not there only seconds before. It can feel as though the conversation becomes more alive simply because you arrived. You may struggle to point to one specific action that changed, yet the overall interaction feels different. Many people ignore this feeling because nothing obvious happened. They tell themselves they must be imagining it. But often, what you are noticing is a real change in his emotional state. Seeing someone who matters naturally lifts his mood, and that quiet shift flows into the way he says hello. If you want to understand it more clearly, observe how he greets other people around him. Listen to his tone, watch his expression, and notice his energy with those he feels neutral about. Then compare those moments with the way he greets you. Even a small difference can reveal far more than it seems. Don't skip this part, because the next example makes this easier to recognize in real life. Picture a gathering where he is casually talking with different people around the room. He greets everyone politely. His conversations are pleasant, but fairly ordinary. Then he notices you. Almost immediately, something changes. It is not loud enough to attract attention, yet it is visible if you are watching closely. His expression becomes brighter. His posture adjusts naturally. As he walks toward you, his voice carries a little more warmth and presence than it did with anyone else. The interaction feels more personal without either of you saying anything unusual. Even if you try to dismiss it, something inside you quietly notices the difference because it does not feel exactly like the way he treats everyone else. These small changes often happen without conscious effort, making them much more difficult to fake than carefully chosen words. What comes next may be one of the clearest signs of all because it reveals what has stayed in his thoughts even while you were apart. A man who genuinely values someone often remembers the little things they shared in previous conversations. One of the first things he says may not simply be hello. Instead, he naturally asks about something you mentioned days earlier. Perhaps he remembers an important meeting, an exam, a family event, or something you were looking forward to. He brings it up almost immediately, before the conversation has even had time to develop. That small question quietly reveals something important. It shows that your words stayed with him long after the last conversation ended. He did not remember because he forced himself to. He remembered because your experiences mattered enough to remain in his mind. Small details like these often reveal genuine attention far better than long conversations filled with empty compliments. When someone naturally remembers what matters to you, it usually says far more about their interest than any perfectly written text message ever could. What makes this detail so meaningful is not only that he remembers it, but that it becomes the very first thing he brings up. Before the conversation has even settled in, it is already waiting at the front of his mind. People rarely begin with something they have not been thinking about. When a memory appears immediately, it usually means it never really left their thoughts. Someone who feels only casual interest may remember details if you remind them. They might respond once you mention them again, but they usually will not begin the conversation by bringing them up on their own. That kind of spontaneous memory often happens because the other person has quietly remained present in their mind without any effort. Imagine this situation. Earlier in the week, a woman briefly mentions feeling nervous about an upcoming event. It is only a passing comment, nothing dramatic, and the conversation quickly moves on. A few days later, they meet again. Right after saying hello, the first thing he asks is how that event turned out. He remembers exactly what she said without being reminded. She is surprised because she barely remembered mentioning it herself, yet he carried that small detail with him. That is not something that usually comes from trying hard. It often comes from genuine attention that continued even while they were apart. Stay with me because the next sign is one of the easiest to notice once you know what to watch for. Another subtle clue appears in the length of the greeting itself. For most people, saying hello is brief. They exchange a few words, smile politely, and continue with whatever they were doing. But when someone feels a stronger connection, that simple greeting often lasts just a little longer. There is no obvious reason for it. The conversation does not immediately end because, without realizing it, they enjoy staying in that moment. They may ask one extra question, hold eye contact a little longer, or hesitate before walking away. None of this feels forced. They are not trying to impress you. They simply do not seem eager for the interaction to end. Those extra few seconds may appear insignificant, yet they often reveal that your presence genuinely matters to them. Small moments like these are difficult to fake because they happen naturally rather than through careful planning. What comes next ties every one of these signs together and changes the way you look at attraction completely. When you step back and view all of these behaviors as a whole, the message becomes much clearer. Genuine interest is rarely hidden inside perfectly written text messages, daily replies, or carefully chosen compliments. Those things can be planned, repeated, or even copied without much emotional investment. What is much harder to imitate are the instinctive reactions that happen during the first moments of seeing someone in person. Notice how his attention immediately shifts toward you. Notice the way his body naturally turns in your direction. Listen for the warmth in his voice. Watch whether he remembers small details you never expected him to recall. Pay attention to whether he allows the greeting to last just a little longer than necessary. These reactions happen too quickly to be carefully performed. They usually come from instinct rather than strategy. That is why they often reveal much more than words ever could. Once you begin looking for these natural responses instead of searching for hidden meanings inside every text message, many of the doubts and questions that once seemed confusing begin to disappear. If these insights helped you understand attraction from a different perspective, make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss future content. Every video is designed to help you recognize genuine behavior instead of relying on assumptions or mixed signals. If this changed the way you think about men's actions and emotional cues, leave the word truth in the comments below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, read your experiences, and continue the conversation with you in the next video.